I never knew how close I came to not existing. Mom told me years later that when she found out she was pregnant with me, she wasn't sure they could afford a kid. Dad wasn't making much, and they were barely scraping by. But then my dad's parents, my grandparents, found out about the pregnancy. Not only were they thrilled, but they went above and beyond. They gave Mom and Dad their house, a nice place in a good neighborhood, close to a great school. They even promised to help out with money. I was born into that house, and for the first few years, life was pretty good. Grandma and Grandpa were always around, picking me up, taking care of me when Mom was working. They'd take me to the park, read me stories, and sneak me treats when Mom wasn't looking. When I started school at 5, they'd pick me up every day. We'd go for ice cream or to the playground. Those were some of the happiest times of my life. But then, everything changed. I remember that night clearly. I was supposed to be asleep, but the yelling woke me up. Mom and Dad were having a huge fight. I couldn't make out everything they were saying, but I heard words like betrayal and how could you? Then I heard the front door slam. I peeked out my window and saw Dad stumbling to his car. He was holding a bottle. I later learned it was whiskey. I watched him drive off, tires screeching. That was the last time I saw my dad alive. The next morning, 2 police officers came to our door. Mom collapsed when they told her dad had been in an accident. He'd lost control of the car and driven off the road. He didn't make it. The funeral was a blur. I remember holding Mom's hand, confused about why Dad was in a box and why everyone was crying. Grandma and Grandpa were there, hugging me tightly, their faces streaked with tears. But after the funeral, things changed rapidly. Mom seemed to bounce back quickly, too quickly. Within months, she had a new man in her life. Before I knew it, they were married, and Mom was pregnant again. "You're going to have a little sister, Carol," Mom told me, her eyes shining. "Isn't that exciting?" I nodded, not sure how to feel. Everything was changing so fast, and I missed Dad. I missed Grandma and Grandpa too. They stopped coming around, and I didn't understand why. "Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa visit anymore?" I asked one day. Mom's face hardened. "They don't want anything to do with us anymore, Carol. They abandoned us, because I've started a new family." Then her face softened. "At least they left us the house and helped with the money for your education. That's something to be thankful for." My little sister arrived a few months after Mom remarried. I remember Mom saying she was born prematurely, but even at my young age, something felt off about that explanation. Still, I was too preoccupied with the sudden changes in my life to question it much. My new stepfather, Frank, worked as a driver. Mom kept her job as a salesperson. We weren't rich by any means, but we always had enough for the essentials. At least, that's what I was told. From the start, it was clear that Frank didn't like me much. He'd glare at me across the dinner table, his jaw clenching whenever I spoke. "Can't you keep that kid quiet?" he'd snap at Mom. "I'm trying to eat in peace here." Mom would rush to placate him. "Carol, honey, why don't you go to your room? I'll bring you your dinner later." As time went on, these moments became more frequent. Frank's temper was short, and everything seemed to set him off, especially me. He'd call me names when Mom wasn't around, his face twisted in disgust. "You're nothing but a freeloader," he'd spit. "A burden. You know that, right?" I'd nod silently, fighting back tears. What else could I do? The contrast between how Frank treated me and my sister was stark. With her, he was all smiles and affection. He'd bounce her on his knee, shower her with gifts, and speak to her in a sickeningly sweet voice that made my stomach turn. "There's my little angel," he'd coo. "Daddy's got a surprise for you." Mom, desperate to keep Frank happy, started finding ways to keep me out of sight. She'd usher me to my room whenever Frank came home, locking the door behind me. I'd sit there for hours, listening to the sounds of a happy family on the other side, laughter, conversation, the clink of cutlery on plates. I didn't understand why I had to eat alone in my room, why I couldn't move freely in my own home, why I was treated like an unwelcome guest. As I grew older, the isolation intensified. Family holidays? I wasn't invited. Trips to visit Frank's friends and relatives? I was left behind. Even when people came to our house, I was told to stay in my room and keep quiet. "We don't want to upset Frank," Mom would say, her eyes pleading. "You know how he gets." And I did know. I'd seen his rages, heard the crashes and bangs when something set him off. So I stayed quiet. I stayed out of the way. I became a ghost in my own home. The only times I felt any semblance of normalcy were the rare occasions when Mom would take me shopping or run errands with her. But even then, there was no room for fun or freedom. It was all business, quick and efficient, always with an eye on the clock. "We can't be too long," Mom would say, checking her watch nervously. "Frank will be home soon." As the years passed, I retreated further into myself. I became shy, withdrawn. At school, I barely spoke to anyone. But in the privacy of my room, in the worlds I created in my mind, I found an escape. I'd make up stories, grand adventures where I was the hero, where I was wanted and loved. When I turned 16, my life took an unexpected turn. Spending most of my time alone in my room, I'd become pretty good at using the internet to escape my reality. One day, I stumbled upon an online publishing house that was looking for fresh voices in children's and young adult literature. On a whim, I submitted some of my stories. To my shock, they loved them. Before I knew it, I was working with them regularly, writing stories and helping develop educational apps for kids and teens. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. My ideas were popular, my stories were being published, and best of all, I was earning my own money. I saved every penny I could, watching my bank account grow with a sense of excitement I'd never felt before. One day, feeling particularly bold after a big payment came through, I decided to share my success with Mom. We were alone in the kitchen, Frank was out on a long-haul drive, and my sister was at a friend's house. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking a little, "I've got something to tell you. I've been working for this publishing house, writing stories and stuff. And, well, I'm making pretty good money." Mom's eyes widened. "Really? Oh, Carol, that's wonderful. I always knew you were a smart girl." Her praise, so rare these days, made me glow. But then her expression changed, becoming calculating. "You know," she said, leaning in close, "this is perfect timing. We've been having some financial troubles lately." My heart sank. I should have known better than to hope for simple pride or happiness. "The thing is," Mom continued, "this house is so big, and the upkeep is expensive. And well, raising you hasn't been cheap either. We've been exhausted trying to provide for you all these years." I felt like I'd been slapped. Hadn't I been the one locked away, barely even part of the family? How had I been such a burden? "Remember that college fund we set aside for you?" Mom said, not meeting my eyes. "Well, we had to use that money. For the house, you know. But now that you're earning your own money, you can support yourself, right?" I nodded numbly, not trusting myself to speak. "That's my girl," Mom said, patting my hand. "Oh, and one more thing. Frank and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you move out after you graduate. We're planning to renovate your room for your sister. She needs more space, you understand." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Move out? But, where will I go?" Mom shrugged, already turning away. "You're a smart girl, Carol. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You've got some savings now, right?" As she walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone, the full weight of her words hit me. I was being kicked out. The money I thought would be my ticket to college was gone. And my own mother didn't seem to care where I ended up. The months leading up to graduation were a blur of anxiety and desperate planning. I threw myself into my schoolwork during the day, determined to at least finish high school strong. At night, I worked tirelessly on my writing projects, trying to save every penny I could. But no matter how I crunched the numbers, it wasn't enough. College tuition, living expenses, books, it all added up to way more than I had or could hope to earn in time. The realization that my dreams of higher education were slipping away hit me hard. I tried to talk to Mom about it once, hoping against hope that she'd have a change of heart. "Mom, I've been looking at college costs, and I don't think I can." She cut me off before I could finish. "Carol, we've been over this. You're on your own now. You'll figure it out." The day of graduation came and went. I should have felt proud, accomplished. Instead, I felt numb. The next morning, Mom appeared in my doorway with a couple of cardboard boxes. "Time to pack up, Carol," she said, her tone eerily cheerful. "Your sister's so excited about her new room." I packed my life into those boxes, fighting back tears. When I was done, Mom helped me carry them to the front door. As I stood on the porch, my meager possessions at my feet, Mom gave me a quick, awkward hug. "Good luck out there," she said, and then the door closed behind her. I stood there for a moment, shell-shocked. Then, taking a deep breath, I picked up my boxes and walked away from the only home I'd ever known. With what little money I had, I managed to rent a tiny studio apartment. It was in a sketchy part of town, and the sound of sirens often kept me up at night, but it was mine. I decided to postpone college for a year. I had no choice, really, and focus on work. I reached out to my contacts at the publishing house, practically begging for more work. To my relief, they were more than happy to oblige. "We've been impressed with your work, Carol," my editor told me. "How would you feel about writing some children's books for us?" I jumped at the opportunity. Soon, I was working around the clock, churning out stories and illustrations. The work was demanding, but I loved it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was good at something, like I had a purpose. Living alone wasn't easy, but I was used to fending for myself. I learned to budget, to cook simple meals, to navigate the public transit system. I even made a few friends in the building, other young people trying to make it on their own. But despite my best efforts, saving for college remained a distant dream. Every time I thought I was getting ahead, some new expense would crop up. A plumbing emergency in my apartment, a laptop repair, a trip to the doctor when I caught a nasty flu, each setback ate into my savings. It had been a year since I'd left home when my phone rang with a number I never expected to see again. My mother's voice came through, sickly sweet and unfamiliar. "Carol, sweetie, how are you? I've missed you so much. Why don't you come visit us this weekend?" Suspicion immediately flared in my gut, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to visit, packing an overnight bag with a mix of anticipation and dread. As soon as I arrived at my old home, my suspicions were confirmed. Mom was overly affectionate, hugging me tightly and peppering me with questions about my life. It felt artificial, like watching a bad actress perform. "Oh, Carol," she cooed, "you must be tired from your trip. Why don't you sleep in your sister's room tonight? She can take the guest room." I nodded, bemused. My sister, now a teenager, rolled her eyes but didn't argue. The next morning, I woke to the sound of familiar voices downstairs. Curious, I made my way to the kitchen, where I froze in the doorway. Sitting at the table were two elderly people I hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly, my grandparents, my dad's parents. Grandma's eyes lit up when she saw me. "Carol, oh, look how you've grown." I stood there, shocked, as they explained why they were there. "We're moving to a nursing home soon," Grandpa said, his voice gruff with emotion. "But before we go, we wanted to make sure you're doing well. That you're prospering." "Yes," Grandma chimed in, "tell us all about your college. What are you studying, dear?" I opened my mouth, not sure what to say, when Mom jumped in. "Oh, Carol's doing wonderfully at school. Aren't you, honey? Top of her class, just like always." I stared at her, unable to believe the lies flowing so easily from her lips. My grandparents looked pleased, but they still had questions. "That's wonderful," Grandma said. "Could we talk to Carol alone for a bit? We'd love to catch up." A flash of panic crossed Mom's face. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Carol's quite busy, aren't you, dear? In fact, we should probably wrap this up soon." She quickly steered the conversation to other topics, barely letting me get a word in. As the visit came to an end, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. Grandma pressed something into my hand, a business card. As soon as my grandparents left, the change in Mom was immediate. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, indifferent expression I knew all too well. "Well, that's done," she said, clearing the table briskly. "You should probably head home now, Carol. I'm sure you have things to do." I stood there, the business card burning a hole in my pocket, as Mom all but pushed me out the door. The warmth and affection of moments ago were gone, replaced by the cool detachment I'd grown up with. As soon as I got back to my tiny apartment, I pulled out the business card my grandmother had slipped me. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" My grandmother's voice came through, warm and familiar, despite the years. "Grandma, it's Carol," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We talked for a while, her voice filled with a mixture of joy and concern. Before I knew it, we'd arranged for her and Grandpa to visit me the next day. I gave them my apartment address, feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. As soon as I hung up, I threw myself into a cleaning frenzy. My small studio apartment wasn't much, but I was determined to make it as welcoming as possible. I scrubbed every surface, organized my meager belongings, and even managed to find a vase for some fresh flowers I picked up from the corner store. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I spent hours in the tiny kitchenette, preparing lunch for tomorrow. I even decided to bake Grandma's favorite cookies, snickerdoodles, using a recipe I'd found online. Morning came too quickly. I was just pulling the last batch of cookies from the oven when there was a knock at the door. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my shirt and went to answer it. There they stood, Grandma and Grandpa. For a moment, we all just stared at each other, years of separation hanging between us. Then Grandma stepped forward, enveloping me in a tight hug. "Oh, Carol," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at you, all grown up." As I ushered them inside, I saw their eyes widen as they took in my small apartment. Confusion flickered across their faces. "Carol," Grandpa said slowly, "why are you living here? Your mother told us you were living in the house." Before I could even begin to explain, they launched into a story that turned my world upside down. "We've always wanted to be part of your life," Grandma said, her eyes brimming with tears. "But your mother, she kept us away." They told me about the night my father died, the real story. My mother had been unfaithful. She was already pregnant with my sister when my father found out. He wanted a divorce, but then the accident happened. I sat there, stunned, as they continued. "The house I grew up in, the one Mom and Frank still lived in, was mine. Left to me in my father's will. We've been sending money for your care every month," Grandma said, reaching for my hand. "After you graduated, we increased the amount, thinking you were in college and needed more." The room seemed to spin. All this time, struggling to make ends meet, and there had been money meant for me? A house in my name? "We wanted to make sure you were living comfortably in the house, that everything was okay," Grandpa added. "That's why we came to visit yesterday." As I sat there, staring at my grandparents in disbelief, the weight of their words slowly sank in. I felt a surge of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness for the childhood I never had. "I don't understand," I stammered. "All this time, there was money for me? A house in my name?" Grandma squeezed my hand tightly. "Tell us everything, Carol. We need to know what really happened." And so, I did. I told them about my lonely childhood, confined to my room like a dirty secret. I spoke of Frank's hostility, of always feeling like a burden. I explained how the money for college had been taken away, how I'd been kicked out with nothing but a few boxes of belongings. "I've been working nonstop," I said, my voice cracking. "Writing children's books, living in this tiny apartment, trying to save for college. I never knew about any maintenance money." As I spoke, I watched my grandparents' expressions change from shock to fury. Grandpa's face turned red, his hands clenching into fists. "This is unacceptable," he growled. "What your mother has done, it's theft, it's abuse. We're going to make this right, Carol. I promise you that." True to their word, my grandparents sprang into action. They hired a lawyer, one of the best in the city. Over the next few weeks, I watched in awe as they fought tirelessly on my behalf. The court case was brutal. Mom and Frank tried to paint me as a rebellious, ungrateful child who had run away. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showed years of diverted funds. Neighbors testified about my isolation. In the end, justice prevailed. The judge ruled in our favor, evicting Mom and Frank from the house that was rightfully mine. The back payments of maintenance money were ordered to be paid to me in full. As we left the courthouse, I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. Yes, I had won, but at what cost? The family I had known, dysfunctional as it was gone forever. But I had a new family now. Grandma and Grandpa were determined to make up for lost time. They helped me move into my house, a concept I was still struggling to grasp. They gave me money for tuition and sat with me for hours, helping me choose the right college. I decided on a school close to the nursing home where they were moving. It felt right, being near them after all these years apart. For a while, everything seemed perfect. I visited Grandma and Grandpa often, soaking up their love and wisdom. We'd play cards, watch old movies, and talk for hours. They told me stories about my dad, filling in the blanks of my own history. But life, I was learning, had a cruel way of giving with one hand and taking with the other. Just as I was settling into my new life, reveling in the love of my grandparents, tragedy struck. Grandpa went first. A heart attack, quick and unexpected. Grandma followed barely 2 months later. The doctors said it was natural causes, but I knew the truth, she'd lost her will to live without him. Once again, I found myself alone. The grief was overwhelming. I'd only just found them, only just started to heal the wounds of my past, and now they were gone. I threw myself into my studies, trying to distract myself from the pain. But every empty holiday, every milestone I couldn't share with them, was a fresh wound. Years passed, and life took on a rhythm I never thought possible. I graduated college with honors, landing a job at a prestigious publishing house, the same one that had given me my first break as a teenager. With the inheritance from my grandparents, I bought a cozy apartment close to work, a place that was truly mine. My financial situation had dramatically improved. I rented out my grandparents' house and my childhood home, providing a steady stream of additional income. For the first time in my life, I felt secure, stable, and most importantly, happy. I had friends, a fulfilling career, and a sense of peace I'd never known before. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One sunny afternoon, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it instantly, my mother's. With a mix of curiosity and dread, I answered. "Carol?" Her voice was sickly sweet, dripping with false affection. "Sweetie, how are you?" Before I could respond, she launched into a sob story. My sister was pregnant, abandoned by her husband. They were all living together, Mom, Frank, and my sister, crammed into a tiny rented apartment. "We have nowhere to go," Mom whimpered. "I was hoping, well, that house you own, your childhood home. Could we maybe stay there? Just until we get back on our feet." I listened in stunned silence as she alternated between begging and crying, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I remembered all too well from my childhood. "Please, Carol," she pleaded. "We're family. We need your help." As she spoke, memories flooded back. The lonely nights locked in my room. The years of neglect and emotional abuse. The day she kicked me out with nothing but a few boxes of belongings. Family? I finally spoke, my voice cold. That's rich coming from you, Mom. Where was this family when you locked me away like a dirty secret? Where was it when you kicked me out with nowhere to go? Carol, that's all in the past. No, I cut her off. It's not in the past. It's right here, right now. You're only reaching out because you need something from me. Just like always. I could almost hear her scrambling, trying to find the right words to manipulate me. But I wasn't that scared, lonely girl anymore. You want my advice, Mom? Solve your own problems. Figure it out on your own. Isn't that what you told me when you threw me out? But Carol. Good luck, I said, echoing her words from years ago. You're going to need it. Without waiting for a response, I hung up. My hand shook as I blocked her number, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For years, I'd carried the burden of her rejection, her neglect. But now, I was finally free. I'm Elizabeth, but most people call me Liz or Lizzie. Some even call me Betty, though I've never been fond of that one. I grew up in what you'd call an ordinary family, Mom, Dad, and my older sister, Kate. Kate's 7 years older than me, and boy, did that make a difference. From the day I can remember, our house was like a shrine to Kate's existence. Every wall had a picture of her first smile, her first steps, or her scribbled drawings that Mom and Dad treated like Picassos. Me? I was just there. I got used to it, you know? Wearing Kate's hand-me-downs, playing with her old toys. It wasn't great, but I didn't know any different. I just learned to keep quiet and not make a fuss. As the years went by, the pattern continued. Kate got new clothes, I got her old ones. She got the latest toys, I got the ones she'd outgrown. But I never complained. I just existed. High school came and went. Kate had already moved out by then, off to college on a scholarship. I thought maybe now my parents would notice me more, but nope. It was all about Kate's college adventures, Kate's new boyfriend, Kate's future. Then came the big announcement. Kate burst into the house one Sunday afternoon, all smiles and excitement. Mom, Dad, I'm getting married, she squealed. You'd think she'd just announced she'd cured cancer or something. Mom burst into tears, Dad started whooping and hollering. Me? I just sat there, wondering if anyone remembered I was in the room. Kate turned to me, her eyes shining. And Lizzie, you'll be my bridesmaid, right? I nodded, forcing a smile. Sure, Kate. Congratulations. As they all hugged and cried and laughed, I slipped out of the room. No one noticed. They never did. Kate's wedding turned out to be a bigger deal than anyone expected. One evening, I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. We'll have to take out a loan, Dad said, his voice strained. Mom sighed. I know, but it's Kate's big day. We can't let her down. I felt a knot form in my stomach. They were going into debt for Kate's wedding? I wanted to say something, to point out how crazy this was, but I knew better. My opinions didn't matter much in this house. The wedding was a lavish affair. Kate looked like a princess, and our parents beamed with pride. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, feeling invisible as always. After the honeymoon, Kate dropped another bombshell. I've decided to be a housewife, she announced over Sunday dinner. Jack makes enough for both of us. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. I could see the worry in their eyes, but they plastered on smiles. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said. If that's what makes you happy. I wanted to scream. They'd taken out a loan for her wedding, and now she wasn't even going to work. But I kept my mouth shut, pushing my food around my plate. It wasn't long before Kate was pregnant. With twins, no less. Our parents went absolutely nuts. Twins, Dad kept saying, shaking his head in wonder. Can you believe it? I could believe it. I could also believe what came next. We should help them buy a house, Mom suggested one night. They'll need the space with 2 babies on the way. Dad nodded. We could make the down payment on a mortgage. There's that nice place not far from here. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Are you serious? I blurted out. You're already in debt from the wedding, and now you want to buy them a house? They both looked at me like they'd forgotten I was there. Maybe they had. Elizabeth, Mom said, her voice stern. This is what family does. We help each other. The twins were born a few months later. 2 little boys, cute as buttons. Mom and Dad were over the moon, spending every free moment at Kate's new house, cooing over the babies. Meanwhile, I was finishing up high school, trying to figure out my next steps. College was the obvious choice, but how was I going to pay for it? One night, I worked up the courage to ask. Mom, Dad, I've been looking at colleges. That's nice, dear, Mom said, not looking up from the photo album of the twins she was putting together. I was wondering, could you help me with tuition? They exchanged that look again. The one that said they'd rather be talking about anything else. Well, sweetie, Dad started, we'd love to help, but with the loan for Kate's wedding and helping with the house. We can cover half, Mom jumped in. But you'll need to figure out the rest on your own. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Half? That's all they could do? After everything they'd done for Kate? But I knew arguing was pointless. Okay, I said, my voice small. Thanks. As I walked back to my room, I heard them resume their conversation about the twins' latest accomplishments. I closed my door, leaned against it, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. I'd managed to get into the local community college, not my dream school, but the only one I could afford with my parents' measly contribution. To make up the difference, I landed a part-time job at a nearby diner. Let me tell you, waiting tables while trying to keep up with college coursework is no picnic. I'd drag myself home most nights, dead on my feet, dreaming of my bed. But even that small comfort was often yanked away from me. It started one Friday evening. I'd just finished a brutal shift and was looking forward to face planting into my pillow when I walked in to find Kate in our living room, the twins crawling around her feet. Oh, Lizzie, she exclaimed. Thank God you're here. I'm at my wit's end with these 2. Mind watching them for a bit? Jack and I haven't had a date night in ages. Before I could even open my mouth, she was out the door, leaving me with 2 screaming 3-year-olds. What the hell? I muttered, staring at my nephews. Don't get me wrong, I love the little terrors, but this wasn't what I signed up for. Mom wandered in from the kitchen. Your sister is exhausted. This is what family does. Besides, it'll be good practice for when you have your own kids. I wanted to scream. Kids? I was barely keeping my head above water as it was. This became a regular occurrence. Every weekend, without fail, Kate would show up, drop off the twins, and disappear. Sometimes she'd claim she had errands. Other times, she and Jack would go catch a movie or grab dinner. And every time, I'd end up playing babysitter. One Saturday, after a particularly hellish week of exams, I'd had enough. Kate had just breezed out the door, leaving the twins mid-tantrum. Mom, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't fair, I'm exhausted, I work, I study, and now I'm expected to give up my weekends too? Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Lizzie, your sister needs the help. You should be glad to do it. But what about what I need? I protested. I'm running myself ragged here. Mom sighed. Elizabeth, don't be selfish. Kate has 2 children to look after. You don't know how hard that is. I gave up. It was clear they weren't going to listen. So I resigned myself to my fate, classes during the week, work in the evenings, and unpaid babysitting on the weekends. Personal life? Huh. That was a joke. The closest thing I had to a social life was making small talk with customers at the diner. Dates? Forget about it. Between work, study, and the twins, I barely had time to shower, let alone meet someone. I was at my breaking point. The constant juggle of work, school, and forced babysitting had left me drained, both physically and mentally. I needed a break, a real one, away from everything and everyone. So, I made a decision. "Mom, Dad," I announced one evening, "I'm taking a few days off. Going to the beach." Their reaction surprised me. For once, they actually seemed happy for me. "That's wonderful, Lizzie," Mom exclaimed. "Where are you going?" I told them about the cheap motel I'd found online, right by the ocean. Nothing fancy, but it was all I could afford. Dad nodded approvingly. "Good for you, kiddo, you deserve a break." I almost fell over from shock. Was this really happening? Were they actually acknowledging my needs for once? The day finally came. I packed my bag, hopped on a bus, and felt the weight lifting off my shoulders with every mile that passed. When I finally arrived at the coast, I couldn't believe my luck. The motel was small and a bit run down, but the ocean view was spectacular. I dropped my bag in the room and headed straight for the beach. The salty air filled my lungs, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I treated myself to lunch at a cute little seaside cafe, savoring every bite. No screaming kids, no homework, no customers to please. Just me, my thoughts, and the sound of the waves. As the sun started to set, I headed back to the motel, already planning my evening of peaceful solitude. But as I approached my room, I heard familiar voices. "Surprise, Lizzie." I froze. There, standing outside the room next to mine, were Mom and Kate, with the twins running circles around their legs. "What are you doing here?" I stammered, my heart sinking. "We couldn't let you be all alone on your vacation," Mom chirped. "So we decided to join you. We're right next door." I noticed their suitcases outside one of the nicer rooms. Of course, they'd splurged on themselves while I was in the budget option. Before I could process what was happening, Kate was pushing the twins towards me. "The boys have been dying to see the ocean. You don't mind watching them for a bit, do you?" "I want to take a walk on the beach." "And I need to run to the store," Mom added. "We'll be back soon." Just like that, they were gone, leaving me standing there with two overexcited 3-year-olds tugging at my hands. What followed was the worst vacation of my life. The twins were out of control, tearing around my small room like tornadoes. They ripped the curtains, broke glasses, and somehow managed to clog the toilet with apples. I had to shell out money I didn't have for repairs and to call a plumber. By the end of the weekend, I was more exhausted than I'd ever been. The final straw came when Kate had the audacity to complain about how tired she was from all the traveling. I lost it. The argument that followed was epic. I yelled, Mom cried, Kate sulked, and the twins screamed through it all. I packed my bags that night and caught the first bus home in the morning. As I watched the coastline disappear behind me, I felt something shift inside. This couldn't go on. Something had to change. I dragged myself through the front door, exhaustion weighing heavily on my shoulders. Dad was in his usual spot, eyes glued to the TV. He barely grunted a hello as I passed. I crashed into bed that night, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. When morning came, I knew what I had to do. I was halfway through packing my suitcase when I heard the front door slam. Mom's voice rang out, sharp and irritated. Elizabeth, where are you? She appeared in my doorway, face flushed with anger. I can't believe you just left us there. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to manage the twins on our own? I bit back a retort about how I manage the twins on my own all the time. Instead, I just kept packing. Mom's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. What are you doing? I'm leaving, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm moving out, I need my own life. Their reactions were immediate and predictable. How can you be so selfish? Mom cried. After everything we've done for you. Dad's face turned red. You ungrateful girl. Have you thought about your sister? Who's going to help her with the twins? I felt something snap inside me. My sister? What about me? When has anyone in this family ever thought about what I need? Elizabeth, Mom gasped. No, I'm serious, I pressed on. Kate has a husband. Let him help with the kids. I need to focus on my own life. You listen here, young lady, Dad growled. If you walk out that door, don't expect us to keep paying for your college. You'll be on your own. I looked at them both, these people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. In that moment, I realized they were strangers to me. Fine, I said, zipping up my suitcase. I'd rather be on my own than live like this. No personal life, no time for myself, just constant demands and screaming kids. I'm done. I pushed past them, dragging my suitcase down the stairs. They followed, still shouting, but I tuned them out. As I reached for the door handle, Mom made one last attempt. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Then, without looking back, I opened the door and stepped out into the unknown. The next few weeks were a blur. I crashed on a classmate's couch while scrambling to find a more permanent solution. Eventually, I connected with a girl from my study group who was also looking for a roommate. We found a tiny apartment that we could just barely afford between the two of us. With my parents cutting me off financially, I had to pick up more shifts at the diner. I was working almost full-time on top of my classes. There were nights I thought I wouldn't make it, when the exhaustion was so deep I could barely think straight. But you know what? For the first time in my life, I felt free. No one was making demands on my time. No one was guilting me into babysitting or putting their needs before my own. The apartment was small, my bed was a mattress on the floor, but it was mine. I threw myself into my studies with a determination I didn't know I possessed. Every all-nighter, every missed social event, every extra shift, it was all working towards my goal. My future. Before I knew it, 2 years had passed. As I sat in the auditorium on graduation day, waiting for my name to be called, I scanned the crowd. A small part of me hoped to see a familiar face, Mom, Dad, even Kate. But the seats I'd reserved remained empty. Life after college was like stepping into a whole new world. I landed a job at a marketing firm, and suddenly, I had a steady income that wasn't just scraping by. For the first time in years, I could breathe easy. I rented my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it was all mine. No roommates, no family drama, just peace and quiet. And let me tell you, it was glorious. I started doing all those normal things I'd missed out on before. I went on dates, made new friends, even had a couple of short-lived relationships. Nothing serious, but it was fun to just be young and carefree for once. My parents? They were still in the picture, but barely. We'd talk maybe once a month, stilted conversations full of awkward silences and thinly veiled disapproval. They were still sore about me moving out, and I wasn't exactly rushing to mend fences. Then came my 25th birthday. I had plans with friends, nothing wild, just dinner and drinks. But a week before, I got a call from Mom. Elizabeth, she said, her voice oddly cheerful, we want you to come over for your birthday. The whole family will be there. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was like stepping back in time. Kate and her husband were there, the twins, now 7 years old, running around like little tornadoes. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins milled about, all smiles and hugs. Happy birthday, Lizzie, they chorused as I walked in. I plastered on a smile, accepting hugs and well wishes. Then came the gifts. Most were typical, clothes, books, gift cards. But then Mom handed me an envelope with a flourish. This is from all of us, she said, beaming. I opened it, my stomach sinking as I saw what was inside. A ticket to a beach resort. We're all going, Dad announced proudly. A big family vacation. We've paid for everything. I froze. A family vacation with the twins? It was my ruined beach trip all over again. I opened my mouth to refuse, but Mom squeezed my arm, whispering harshly, "Don't you dare make a scene. Not in front of everyone." So I smiled and thanked them, all the while screaming internally. The party wound down, relatives trickled out, and finally, it was just us, me, Mom, Dad, Kate, and her family. That's when I let loose. "I'm not going," I said flatly. "What?" Kate gasped. "But it's a family trip." "Exactly," I replied. "And I'm not interested in spending my vacation babysitting your kids again." Kate burst into tears. "You don't love us at all, do you? You don't care about your nephews." "I care about them just fine," I snapped. "But if I wanted kids, I'd have my own." The argument went round and round. Mom called me ungrateful, Dad looked disappointed, Kate kept crying. They all tried to guilt me, to pressure me into giving in. "Fine," I said finally, my voice tired. "I'll go." They all looked relieved, like they'd won some great victory. But they had no idea what was coming. The day of departure arrived, and I found myself at the airport, surrounded by my overly cheerful family. Kate and her husband were practically bouncing with excitement, already making plans for all the alone time they'd have while I watched the twins. "You'll have so much fun with Aunt Lizzie," Kate told the boys, winking at me. "She'll take you to the beach, build sandcastles, maybe even go snorkeling." Mom and Dad were beaming too, going on about how nice it would be for Kate to have a break. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted to do on this vacation. It was clear they all saw me as nothing more than a convenient babysitter. As we approached the check-in counter, I made my move. "Oh," I exclaimed, feigning discomfort. "I need to use the restroom." "You guys go ahead and check in. I'll meet you at the gate." They nodded, distracted by wrangling luggage and excited children. I watched them join the queue, then turned and walked briskly in the opposite direction. My heart was pounding as I approached a different check-in counter. I handed over my passport and the ticket I'd bought weeks ago, a flight to a small, peaceful island resort. Once through security, I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone. My hand shook slightly as I typed out a message to Mom, "I'm not coming with you, I'm going on my own vacation. Enjoy your trip." I hit send and immediately turned off my phone, not wanting to deal with the fallout just yet. I could almost hear the explosion of anger and disbelief that would be happening at the other check-in counter. As I settled into my seat on the plane, I turned my phone back on briefly. It immediately exploded with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, angry texts. I listened to one voicemail from Mom, her voice shrill and furious. "Elizabeth Morgan. How dare you abandon your family like this? You've ruined everything. Your sister is in tears, her husband is furious, they were counting on you to watch the boys. And I had plans. You are the most selfish, ungrateful." As the plane took off, I sipped my champagne and gazed out the window. The guilt was still there, a small knot in my stomach. I knew I'd have to deal with the fallout eventually. There would be angry phone calls, tearful accusations, probably another round of being called selfish and ungrateful. But overwhelmingly, I felt free. Light. Like I could finally breathe. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I was going on a trip that was just for me. No obligations, no babysitting, no family drama. Just me, the beach, and whatever I decided I wanted to do. As the plane touched down on the small, tropical island, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The warm breeze that greeted me as I stepped off the plane seemed to whisper, "Welcome to freedom." I checked into my resort, a modest but charming place right on the beach. As I unpacked, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned on my phone. Instantly, it exploded with notifications. Hundreds of text messages, missed calls, and voicemails flooded in. With a mix of amusement and trepidation, I scrolled through some of the messages. "How could you do this to us, Mom? You ruined everything, Kate. You're so selfish, Elizabeth, Dad." I couldn't help but smile. For once, I had chosen myself over their demands. I turned the phone off again and tossed it into the hotel safe. For the next week, I was unreachable. And what a week it was. I lounged on the beach, read books uninterrupted, went snorkeling, and even tried my hand at surfing. I chatted with other vacationers, went on a few casual dates, and stayed out as late as I wanted. No schedule, no responsibilities, no screaming kids. Just me and the rhythm of the waves. All too soon, it was time to head home. I returned to my apartment tanned, rested, and more centered than I'd felt in years. But the real world was waiting to intrude on my newfound peace. The very next day, there was a pounding on my door. I opened it to find Mom and Kate, faces red with anger. "How dare you?" Mom screeched, barging in without invitation. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Kate wasn't far behind. "You ruined our entire vacation." The boys were devastated. They launched into a tirade, their voices overlapping as they hurled accusations and insults. I was selfish, ungrateful, a terrible daughter and sister. I owed them for the ticket they'd bought me, for the vacation I'd ruined, for the childcare I'd failed to provide. I let them rant for a few minutes, their words washing over me without sticking. Then, calmly but firmly, I spoke. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through their noise. "I don't owe you anything. Not money, not childcare, not my time. I'm an adult, and I get to make my own choices." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "I'm not discussing this further. Please leave. When you're ready to treat me with respect and have a calm conversation, we can talk. Until then, I think it's best we don't communicate." They stared at me, shocked into silence. Then, with a few more choice words, they stormed out. As the door slammed behind them, I let out a long breath. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. Over the next few weeks, I made some big changes. I found a new apartment in a different part of town and moved without telling my family my new address. I threw myself into my work and picked up some new hobbies, painting, yoga, even started learning a new language. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, pangs of guilt. But every time I came home to my peaceful apartment, every time I made plans without worrying about babysitting duties, every time I pursued a new interest just because I wanted to, I knew I'd made the right choice. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday, my family and I will find a way to have a healthy relationship. Maybe not. But I do know this, I'll face whatever comes on my own terms, standing tall and unapologetic in the life I've chosen for myself.